So let's see where we are with our attendees real quick. Okay, looks like we're doing good. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Nicole Schlinger, and I'm the president here at Campaign HQ. And I want to thanks everyone so much for joining. This is our December Campaign HQ Insiders webinar, and I'm joined by one of my good friends, Andy Yates from Public Affairs Partners. Andy and I have been friends going back a lot of years, whether it's a candidate campaign or an issue campaign. The thing that I love about working with Andy is he knows how to really assess the situation and put together a strategy that is going to address the particular challenge of the day. It's never going to be cookie cutter. And then he knows how to implement all those pieces and actually put them together to win. So today what we're going to be talking about is using grassroots tactics to advance your policy agenda. And I do want to thank everyone who submitted their questions in advance. But if you have a question that comes up during the presentation today, just put that in the Q&A queue and we'll get to as many as we can. That Q&A queue, I think, is right next to the chat. So if you have a question that comes up during the presentation, just type it in there. And I do want to remind everyone that this webinar is closed to the press. So and just let me remind you guys, we've got a great case study coming up today, something that our team at Campaign HQ and Andy's team at Public Affairs Partners worked on together. And at Campaign HQ, what we do is we help you plan, manage, and execute all of the communication that centers around someone's 10-digit phone number. That's live calls, automated calls, text messages, telephone town halls. And we do that not just to win elections, but to win issue battles, to put good public policy into law, because ultimately that's why we work on elections to begin with. And our objective is to take away the hassle and the frustration and to just make it fast and easy for you to get the result you want, which is to get lawmakers to pay attention and vote your way on issues and to avoid wasting time and money on the tactics that don't work. And for our insiders, who are our clients with a signed MSA, a master services agreement, we do even more. I always tell people, think about it like an Amazon Prime for your issue. What we're going to do is we're just going to come in and provide extra value at no extra cost. And that includes writing custom grassroots advocacy plans, coordinating what we're doing with all the existing vendors and the other people on your team, locked in bulk pricing for text messages, and early access to book what you need at the busiest times of the year, so you never hear, gosh, we can't do that for you. Members only programming like this, and of course the limited edition swag. All you need to do is just sign the MSA. Basically, it puts into writing what we've always done with a handshake. There's no minimum requirement, but now what it means is we know to keep an eye on you and everything that you're working on. And you know, when it comes to issues today, frankly, the problem today is there's so much noise out there. So unless your issue is a lawmaker's pet issue, or maybe you've been friends with them for years, it's just really hard to get lawmakers and their staff to pay attention, particularly at the state level where so much of the real battle is being fought these days, because as you guys know, legislation that gets passed in California about livestock or in New Jersey about electric cars, these things are going to affect your clients in all 50 states. And the good news is we've got a magic weapon. You know, look, I've been working on campaigns since 1996, and there is one thing that politicians fear most, and it is losing their next election. So the most surefire way to get politicians to listen is to hit them where it matters, and that's with their constituents. So when they start hearing from constituents and those messages are coming from them at every different direction, by phone, by email, at town hall meetings, and especially with state legislators who are a bit more accessible than federal, you can find them at the grocery store, at their kids' soccer game. We call this surround sound. And that's when you really get them to pay attention, how you really get them to listen. But the reality is, you know, if you're just one person, how do you make all of that happen, you know, on a limited time frame, on a limited budget, and when you have a limited number of grassroots activists in the place you need them? And so that's where I'm going to turn it over to Andy and let him tell the story about the public affairs campaign that he ran earlier this year that was just so incredibly successful at putting all of this into action and making all the pieces work together. So I'm going to stop sharing and turn it back over to Andy.
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you and Campaign HQ for having me on. Your participants probably don't need to hear this because I think a lot of them are your clients, but Nicole and her team are the best. They are the best option out there for everything's phone related. They're a joy to work with, great customer service. Most importantly, in my opinion, they're not afraid to speak their minds. They're not one of those vendors that just rubber stamps what you tell them to do. They help you craft a plan that's going to work, make sure it executes. And if they can't do something, they tell you they can't do it. Something's not going to work, they tell you it's not going to work. So thank you, Nicole, and your team for having me on and being such a good partner for probably 10 years now. So I appreciate the opportunity to be on with you all and share with you about this. It's a pretty unique issue story here. I think people will find very interesting. We were brought into this by a group called Faith Wins America into the gambling battle that was going on in the North Carolina legislature this year. And particularly there was a push for both video poker as well as casino gambling. And it had come up previously in the 21 cycle. We had engaged somewhat at that time and helped defeat the issue in 21. It came back up with a fervor in 23. It had a lot of momentum behind it. Sports gambling had passed earlier in the year. More and more states seem to be going down this line. But more importantly, they had lined up the state Senate leadership behind it. They had employed 17 of the top 20 lobbyists in North Carolina, consultants tied to both the Democrat governor and the Republican president of the Senate. There was a lot of momentum here. They were trying to tie it to other key issues in the legislature. And so it was a huge issue going on here in North Carolina, and that was very divisive in the Republican caucus. And it was something that they were the Senate was using to pressure the House to get things they wanted in the budget. So it had gotten tied into a major budget battle. If you were paying attention, North Carolina went from May to October basically to get our budget done, as they were trying to work out this and a couple of other issues. So this was a big issue that played into all of that. And we were contacted by Faith Wins America because they knew that they had to really drill down and go to war, so to speak, to win this battle with the cards stacked against them. And they wanted to come in and wage a comprehensive grassroots campaign. So they reached out to me and we sat down. I talked with their consultant, sat down and talked about a number of options of things to do. And a couple of things that we set on quickly. One is this was a Republican battle. Republicans have the supermajority in the House and Senate in North Carolina. Nothing's going to pass without Republican votes. We have the governor matters if a bill passes closely because he can sign it, but if the Republicans firmly for or against something, even the governor doesn't matter. And you're not going to. So that was a big factor in this. And we knew we had to go to the House. The Senate leadership was on board. The Senate caucus was, for the most part, was on board with the bill. If it came for a vote in the Senate, it was going to pass in the Senate. So we knew we had to go after the House, and we knew we had to go after Republicans. And we knew the key Republicans in the House are all worried about Republican primaries. None of these folks are in leadership at the time, or that were potentially key targets for us. None of them were in swing districts. So they're worried about Republican primary voters, which fortunately are the folks who are most likely to be opposed to gambling because of the impact it has on crime, on families, and the moral arguments against it. So that was the world that we were walking into. One of the very unique challenges is, unlike when we dealt with this issue in 21, and typically when you deal with public affairs issues, we did not have a specific bill to fight. There were multiple bills that had been introduced related to video poker and gambling. And there was also the threat that it was going to be in the budget, which grew more and more. And they tried to get it in the budget right up to the last minute. There was multiple plans for how to handle it. There was multiple plans on the video poker side. There's multiple plans on the casino side, from having a half dozen or more to one they pushed at the end, which was 4 very specific locations. So they just wanted to push it through. They were all over the place how they were going to do it. And Nicole can tell you from experience, it's much easier to galvanize opposition against a specific bill than it is a wide issue when you don't know how they're going to approach it, and you really don't know when it was going to come up. We were getting tons of information about when it was going to come up on the floor in caucus. Was it going to be voted on committee? So there was a lot of just moving parts that we had to deal with. So after talking to their consulting team, we settled on coming up with a multifaceted campaign that was digital, which is what our focus is over at Public Affairs Partners, which was all things phone, which is Nicole's expertise at Campaign HQ, as well as they wanted to vendor direct edge, and Adam Feldman to do the direct mail, who did a great job there. And we engaged Faith Wins America's grassroots network of pastors to mobilize their churches, parishioners on the ground. So we looked at this multifaceted approach and immediately reached out to those folks, got everybody on the same page, because that was the key to this, is that the targets had to be the same, both in terms of what legislators we targeted, the audience and the audiences we targeted. The messaging had to be consistent across the board. We had to be pushing emails and calls across the board. We had to be pushing people to the same website, which is where the issue impact page that Nicole and her team helped us set up came in. We were able to use all the methods to drive people there. So it was a very coordinated, precise message in front of the same folks, very organized. And it played into the hands of the grassroots side because it gave them the cover they needed to engage and to take the issue on. It takes a lot. It's a hard thing for pastors sometimes to speak out on these political issues and galvanize their members. So that was important there. They felt like we had their backs and we had that cover. So that's why we went with the multifaceted approach, and everything worked so well together. On the digital side, we were running both display and pre-roll ads, the 15-second level, to Republican. Our targets were all Republican primary voters because, again, that's what mattered, and all the same across the board. So we were running display and pre-roll video, pushing emails and phone calls, and everything had an action push to it. That was big for the client. They didn't want this generic kind of, pardon my French, crappy messaging that you see on some issue advocacy campaigns that says, oh, raising taxes is bad, casino gambling is bad. Well, okay, that spends a lot of money, but it doesn't really do anything because the legislators aren't hearing from you. They want a call to action in everything. So we incorporated it there. Nicole on her side, right after we started running the mail and the digital, started running patch through phone calls to push people to call their legislator. They sent out text messages, encouraging people to call their legislator. They did a survey in one particular district to try to scare the legislator there. All those things worked together. And we had the direct mail going in there, which also had the website on there. It had a QR code, an email address, phone number for the legislators, pushing that call to action. And all these things work together so well because you can pick up the phone and do patch-through calls are wonderful. They produce great results for us, but you can pick up the phone and call somebody for a patch-through call and they know nothing about the issue. And it's going to take more time and more work to get them to actually take action and push that button and call through, when they're already mad about it because they're seeing digital ads, they're getting mail, they're hearing about it from their pastor. It's much easier to get them to press that button and patch through. And they're going to be much more passionate when they patch through, which is what we want. And, the neat thing about working with state legislators is a lot of these folks, if they get 10 phone calls, people aren't as engaged here as they are at the federal level. They sit in the congressional office where their staff are sitting there answering dozens of calls each hour. If these people get 10 or 15 calls on an issue, they're getting scared. Which patch-through calls, we're able to guarantee 60 calls a day per legislator. That's an amazing thing to be able to do and has a huge impact. We were able to get tons of emails going through. We had another 1,000 calls come from parishioners at these churches. We had over 300 pastors, I think it was 319 pastors that personally phone called. That pastor sent an open letter, over 200 signed a letter to legislators. So they were getting a lot of personal touches, personal interaction that felt organic, but was all part of this detailed public campaign where we got people upset and then we gave them an outlet to do something about it. And I think that's what made it effective. And we had the cover there for the people on the ground. And one of the pastors very specifically called Chad Conley, who's our contact at Faith Wins America, and said, Chad, I need to know that the digital started. I need to know the mail started. I can't go to my folks until it started. I can't tell the other pastors to do it. And he called me and confirmed it had started. And they went to the mat on it and busted their tails to get it done. But they had to have that cover before they were willing to stand out there, because some of these pastors were having people call a legislator who's a member of their church. So it was a very touchy thing for some of these folks. And it ended up, at the end of the day, being, and I may be jumping ahead, Nicole, so stop me if I am, but it ended up being highly effective. I mean, less than a week into it, we had one legislator pick up the phone and call Chad and say, listen, the other legislature and I from this county, and I'll protect the legislator's name, but from this county, we're both with y'all. Y'all can make the calls stop. Please make the ads stop. We've got you. We've always been against it. We're not changing our minds. And that's one of the kind of the things we did here is we did a mix of targeting, which really helped. We targeted three key legislative leaders: the House Speaker, the Majority Leader, and the Rules Chairman. But we also targeted the Republicans in the State House who were considering running statewide in 24 because we knew their antennas were up. They would be really subject to political pressure. And then we mixed in some members who were either close to the speaker, either geographically or in support of the speaker. So he'd be hearing it from him, as well as a couple folks that we knew were going to be against with us, that were against video poker and casino gambling, just to keep them riled up about it so they would keep it going. And we made sure that these weren't the against everything folks, but these were actually people that their colleagues would listen to, because we knew the battle was in caucus. So that was one of the big things that we did. And we divided the list of folks with the way we did the messaging with digital, with mail, and with phones. We were able to divide it so we had two groups of legislators. We had the legislators that got the stick, that we were afraid that we're going to vote for it. So we need to tell them what was going to happen if they voted for it. We had the legislators who got the carrot. We thought they were with us. We wanted to keep them there. So that was more of a thank you, keep fighting. You're doing a great job. We appreciate you doing this kind of message. And the nice part is, with all the ways that we did this, you were able to divide that message up so it fits for each legislature. So there's nothing generic. There's nothing cookie cutter. The digital ads running in each district were specific to each legislator. For the phone messages were specific to the legislature, that legislator. For the mail, all three pieces of mail there was 30 pieces of mail ultimately designed. Each piece of mail was different to each legislator. So it wasn't just a generic gambling is terrible, tell your legislator vote against it, insert picture here mailer. It was very creative, very specific to that person. All of that makes a difference. It makes you seem more organized. And the goal of this is kind of twofold in my mind, is to put political pressure on them, to let them hear from voters in their district who support they need in a primary, but it's also to scare them with the ads, because they don't, with the ads, whether it's on the phone with the text messaging, whether it's on the mail, whether it's on the digital, they don't know how much you're spending. They don't know how many ads going out. They don't know how many times people are seeing these. They're freaking out and seeing, and they're really, so you want to get that freak out going, as well as the political and peer pressure from people in their district. And then, we were able to throw in on the digital side some unique targets to help with that. If we knew them where the member went to church, we added their church into the digital targeting. We added their home into it. We added the General Assembly into it. So legislators who may not have been getting the calls, emails, and the direct mail in their district would still see the digital ads and worry it might be coming to them. And I think all of that played together and made a difference. And the other side hired 17 out of the top 20 lobbyists in North Carolina, put in over $1 million in contributions, but did none of the grassroots. They probably outspent our side 4 or 5 to 1, if not more. It's the tough part about public affairs as opposed to political. You don't know how much is spent, but they drastically outspent, but they spent on all the traditional methods, which are still valuable, still good. To all my lobbyist friends out there, we love you, love working with you. What y'all do is still effective and important, but you've got to cover both bases. And we had some of the Christian policy groups that had their executive directors, their lobbyists helping out on our side, but we had the full grassroots effect. And I think that made a real difference, and especially a battle that went on for months. We were able to start out early, get everybody lined up on our side, and give them to put the pressure on to allow them to hold in there. And they did. They held the line. It never made it out of caucus, even when they threatened that there wouldn't be a budget without this in it. And that threat was made that they wouldn't even pass a budget if the gambling wasn't in it. Our folks didn't budge in caucus and held the line, and the bills died. It didn't get in the budget. Never even made it to a vote on the floor. It was never voted out of committee. So it went from being a done deal, this was going to happen, to being completely dead on the House side. So it was a huge win and a fascinating battle. I could obviously talk about it the rest of the afternoon, but that's kind of the overview of what we did.
So I love it. And it's fun to relive the whole thing. I was just looking over some of the stats, and just so everyone on the call knows, we're finishing up putting together a case study. So we'll email that to everyone here within the next week or so. But we We sent over 280,000 text messages. We patched through 6,000 people to their lawmakers. So that was just absolutely, that was absolutely outstanding. It's hard, when someone goes into a legislator's office after that happens, it's hard for them not to listen to what you have to say.
Mhm.
So
And out between the digital direct mail and obviously what you all did with the text and the pass through calls, the numbers you just gave, we had close to 2 million touches to voters across the 10 districts between
yeah,
digital impressions, direct mail hits, phone calls, text messages. I mean, which is an amazing amount when you're talking about universes of 5 to 10,000 primary voters in 10 legislative districts. That's
yeah,
pretty impressive. I was looking earlier, I think we averaged, 350 to 500,000 video impressions per district. And in some of the districts, we got up to 1 million digital impressions. That's the other thing I think that our team did. I think is important is we looked at each of these districts individually. We didn't just take the pot of money and divide it by 10, but we looked at how many targets were in each district and split our resources based on how many targets there were. So you were getting the most mileage where you needed it. I say all these folks, a lot of folks would just say, okay, you've got $100,000 to do advocacy, 10 districts, that's $10,000 a district. We don't take that approach. We craft something specific for each district, make sure it's what's going to work there and tailor it and see what's working where and focus resources and action on where it's working. And, at one point we did take two of the legislators out because they were and refocusing resources to some other districts because we knew they were 100% with us by their act, not just their words, but by their actions. So being able to be nimble and adapt is important in all of this. And yeah, I think it's important. I probably should have led with this, but it's important to have a team of folks that have worked together before and work well together. This wouldn't have happened if it had been siloed off. If us on the digital side weren't talking to Nicole and her team every day on the phone side and Adam and Direct Edge every day on the mail and Chad on the grassroots, if all four of our individual units weren't communicating with each other, we'd have never had the consistency in targeting and message. We'd have never produced these results, and we probably would have failed on this issue.
Right. Yeah, an issue that, when you look at what the way the way the scenario played out, the odds were stacked against us at the outset. I think that the default belief was, the default belief inside the Capitol was that we would probably lose.
I mean, ask yourselves how many times, especially when the governor and the legislative leaders are of different parties, if you had the governor, the president of the Senate, the speaker of the House, all in support of an issue, all saying it was critical it pass this year, all saying it needed to pass to be able to pass a budget, and that issue failed.
Yeah.
That doesn't, I don't want to toot my own horn too much, but that does
a little.
That doesn't happen. It's not happened to me in my career. I don't think that's something that happens very often. And it's because of the right tactics, but it was also because of the teamwork and and the fact, like what Nicole said, it wasn't a cookie cutter approach. It was really drilling down into the issue, what the key points were, what resonated with folks, what was the right way to hit them, and no egos involved in terms of dividing stuff up, but focusing on what works. And that's the key to these things and taking a campaign like approach to it. I mean, that's literally what we did. It was the same things that we would do if we were trying to elect a state legislator. It was just a lot more targets, and it was about defeating not a bill, but but the overall issue. And that was the key part, I think, of all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again and dig into some of those tactics in just a little more detail there. So I think I got my screen shared again. I
see it.
Okay, good. I always want to make sure. I want to give a little bit more detail from our end on how the phone side of this really dovetails with the mail and the digital and the grassroots and the direct lobbying that's going on inside the Capitol too. So, if your goal is, I always tell people, if your goal is to create opportunities for real-time personal human to human connection, then using a medium that is real time and personal and human to human makes a whole lot of sense. Will you speak to everyone in your target audience? No, but that's not the goal. The goal is to make sure that, on any given day, we got 60 people that were voters in that district to talk to their state representative that day. So you don't need to reach everyone. You need to reach enough folks that are going to move the needle in the right direction. And so three good options on that. The first are event turnout calls. We know that in-person interactions are the number one most impactful form of constituent contact. So if you can get people to show up at their senator or congressman's public meetings, to show up at a rally at the Capitol, state legislators, like I said, are so accessible. If you can get 5 or 10 people to show up at their town hall meeting, that's going to make a real difference. And then once they commit, remind them how important it is to show up and reinforce the message. The next thing is telephone petition drives. When you've got a long runway, we can build membership or support for an issue. Basically, what we do is ask people, we explain the issue, we ask the voter to add their name to the petition, and then we collect emails and recruit volunteers. And that's really critical when you're trying to wage a campaign style grassroots issue battle. Every day you're going to get a new list of supporters that you can plug into your grassroots efforts. You can print and deliver these to the lawmaker's office. I've seen people do that as part of an earned media effort. You send out a press release telling reporters when and where you'll be at the Capitol, and you take a video dropping off these big binders of people. You post it on socials, you get the idea. And then patch through calls. This is really the bread and butter of phone-based grassroots advocacy. I always think about this. This is the ground troops that are going to complement the air and the digital campaign. So, first we decide which lawmakers' opinions actually make a difference. Like Andy said, we did 6,000 batch through calls for Faith Wins in North Carolina, but we didn't target everyone. There were only certain lawmakers who really made a difference and for different reasons and who had different levers that were going to move them. Sometimes it's fence sitters on a committee. Sometimes it's vulnerable incumbents in a swing district. It's the speaker. It's whoever controls the bill calendar of what's going to come up for debate. Then we look at the people in their district who are likely to agree with us on the issue, because what you want to find is people who are going to agree with you and be passionate about it. You call them, you educate them, and then you say, do you agree that we shouldn't have video gambling in gas stations where children might have easy access to that? Well, no, I don't want that. Well, we wait to get their confirmation that they're with us on the issue before we ask them if we can transfer them to their lawmaker's office. And that's it's not just the quantity of contacts, it's the quality of contacts. And you can decide exactly how many people you're going to transfer to speak to each office. You ramp up when you need more, you ramp down when you need less. When someone shows you in their words and their deeds that they're with you, you can move that budget someplace else. And we just keep calling until we get the right level of activity every day. So, a lot of the things that we do, we can't control how many people are going to open the email or read the social posts, but you know exactly what to expect of how many calls you're going to get to your lawmakers when you do the patch through calls. And the other thing is patch throughs can be spun up really, really fast. Now, Andy and his team would never do this to us, but some other people do. You could be up and running in 24 hours, but sometimes people call us in the morning and they've got a committee hearing in the afternoon. And in many cases, we can get up and running quickly. We can get the data for you. We can use your data. We can call the cell phones and landlines together, and that's a big, big change. And it's made a really big impact in the results. So that'll all be in the case study that we show to you. And then talking about the text messaging, this is, what we were able to do with the text messaging in this campaign was particularly effective because we used it to different effects. A lot of times we've seen people who will send out a text message that says, please call your lawmaker at this phone number. And then they say, well, Nicole, how many people click to call? Well, I can't tell you that. It's as if you had texted, if Andy had texted me a phone number of a friend and said, call this person. We don't know that. What we do is we put an IVR number in the middle of it. So we'll create our own toll-free number that's just for you. And when the constituent calls it, it says, Hi, this is Andy with Faith Wins, and we wanted to let you know you're going to be talking to Representative so-and-so. Please tell him to vote vote no on such and such. And then we transfer them through. And just by putting that IVR in the middle, now we know exactly who called, how many times they called, what time of day, and how long they were on the line. Now you've got something that's trackable and measurable, and that's really impactful. And just that really short message in the middle of it gets rid of the people who clicked by accident, who don't really want to do it, who chickened out, they weren't sure, all of those kind of things. Even just the butt dials, you just get rid of that by doing that way. The event turnout. This is something that we see folks do a lot. Again, if you have people that you're trying to drive to the Capitol or to a lawmaker's in-person event, if they say they're going to come, send them a text to remind them. I can't tell you how important that is. We've been doing ID and advocacy with text to online surveys. And then last but not least, this is we did this in a really big way with Faith Wins, driving advocates to issue impact pages, those landing pages that that people can go to, they can put in their name and address, and we'll show you here in just a second on the next slide. But the last thing I wanted to mention is all of the texting that we're doing is P2P. And what that means is no opt-ins are required. We've got our team of agents sending the messages. They come from a 10-digit long code, which means it looks like a real 10-digit phone number in the area of your choosing. So it's a really localized, personalized effort. Talking about the issue impact pages. These are customized landing pages where the voter fills in their name, their address, their email, and our system automatically sends an email to any state or federal lawmaker in the country that we've got it set up to do. Now, you might have seen landing pages like this before, and up until now, the big problem has been you had to sign up for an extended contract with a software platform and go through a really long onboarding process. But we all know that these issues come up quickly. And what happens if you need to do something right now? And once it's done, it's done. You don't need that, again, in 2 years from now or 4 years from now. And this is actually the page that we set up. And the thing that I love about this was we used the same page on the digital and on the email and on the texting. So the message was consistent every place we used it. We texted the link only to the districts that actually mattered to us. And we used the UTM code so we can track which ads were driving traffic, which texts were driving traffic, which emails were driving traffic. And just like the patch throughs, we were able to turn it off once we'd gotten the number of emails we'd wanted to the number of to the different districts where we were targeting those lawmakers. And every day we were just sending an update with all the advocates, all their contact information. When a battle goes on for a long time and you're collecting those emails, you might want to email those people back a second and a third time. The next thing that we can do is once the person fills in their information and hits send, we ask them to record a video testimonial. Now, don't worry, because those don't go directly to the lawmaker. They just come to us. We review them, and the ones that are good, we send them to you. And let me tell you, these are powerful. We had someone send a video of a newborn baby just from the hospital, hours old. We had someone who immigrated to this country from a dictatorship talk about the value of freedom. What you can do is take these and put them on your phone. You can show them to the lawmakers, to their staff. They see a face and a voice. You can put them on your website. You can contact them to be on TV ads with you. I've just seen so many options that are just really, really endless on this. So, I know we've got the page on here that we actually used. Andy, did you want to maybe speak for a minute or two about what you did on the digital side with the pages? Oh, you're muted.
Absolutely. One, I'll say that these pages are particularly powerful for the reasons Nicole mentioned. And what we did on the digital side was we had these linked to all of the display ads, all of the pre-roll video ads. So if anybody clicked on it at any time, plus we had a button on there directing them to click to contact their legislator. If anybody clicked on it any time or clicked on that button, they would immediately come to the issue impact page. And the neat thing about this is it sets it up so you don't have to know your state rep. You don't have to know that Nicole is your state representative. It automatically, based on the address that you put in, sends it to your state rep. So we had to have one link for and instead of having 10 different links or 10 different legislators, we were able to work with one link, make sure everybody saw it. So everything on the digital side was driving folks here as well. And we were able to embed on the page the generic version. We had a unique version for each of the 10 legislators, but we also created a generic version specifically for the issue impact page of the video. So the video was right here. So people need a reminder, somebody forwarded this page to a friend, they were able to see its digital video and get a better understanding of the issue. So it's very effective, key part of what we did. And the digital campaign just doesn't work without quality landing pages like this. And one thing that Nicole mentioned, I kind of want to emphasize is, we had time to plan with this. We didn't have a ton of time. We had time to plan out and strategize, get our team together. But all of the stuff we're talking about today, direct mail takes a little bit longer, but everything else we're talking about today is also rapid response. Nicole and her team, as she mentioned, sometimes same day they can get pass-through calls out. Definitely the next day, same day on text if you're already compliant. This stuff can happen very quickly. That's something I'm proud of we've done on the digital side. If you got your ads designed, we can have ads up in front of your target audience in less than an hour. So, I mean, this is stuff that you can get out. Sometimes stuff changes in a day. You think a bill's dead and it's back up. Sometimes something gets introduced out of nowhere, added to a budget, taken out of a budget. 95% of the stuff we're talking about today can be implemented almost like the snap of a finger. So that's something to keep in mind too. Don't panic when you're in panic mode. Reach out to us and we'll help you come up with solutions that can be immediately implemented. And that way you're not just sitting there panicking and pulling your hair out. You're taking action and hopefully calming your clients down.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. Don't panic. So, and then actually there's one tactic that because the session ended and the bill never came up, there was one tactic we had in our plan that we actually never deployed. So I just want to share a different example where we used it, because I want folks just to know there's been some big changes here on telephone town halls. So, I always tell people, have you ever, when you try hosting an in-person event to recruit supporters or get the word out for an issue, what winds up happening, we've all been there, is, you rent a room, you run a bunch of ads, you send out some postcards, and then 15 or 20 people show up and we call it a win, right? With a telephone town hall, we have found that we are recruiting and speaking to exponentially more people at a fraction of the cost. So we had a client who dialed out to about 15,000 people in 3 Nebraska legislative districts, and over 1,200 people joined their event and listened to our speakers for an average of 15 minutes. And our speakers, they weren't the governor, they weren't a senator. It was people who worked at this issue advocacy organization, explaining about the bill, telling people to call their lawmakers. And during the event, we asked those 1,200 people, press 1 if you agree with our issue, press 2 if you'll commit to calling your legislator. We read the lawmakers' phone numbers over and over again. We got hundreds of people to agree to it. They got their bill out of committee and onto the floor for a vote. It was just a huge audience, a huge participation, and really specific, actionable data. And so, we had another, we worked in West Virginia, and this was a bill. I always tell people this has to be an embarrassment of, riches, because they couldn't decide whether to cut the income tax, the property tax, or sales taxes. And so I think the governor wanted to cut the income tax, and the House and Senate wanted to cut the property and the sales tax. So for 3 years, they did nothing but argue and not cut anyone's taxes. We worked for an organization that happened to support the governor's income tax cut plan, and they did a statewide telephone town hall. They called out to 110,000 people, and you can dial out to both landlines and cell phones. And that's the big change that has really driven that exponential boost in participation. So across the state of West Virginia, we called out to 110,000 people. They had 6,700 people join this call. So, and we went back and did the calculations on it. They paid about $2.25 per person on the line. You cannot rent a room at an Embassy Suites and give people pigs in a blanket and bottled water for $2.25. There is no event that you can hold in West Virginia or any other state for $2.25 a person, let alone get people who live, 4, 5, 6 hours away. We're not talking about, we're not talking about small, compact urban states here. We're talking about, rural America. So, not only could you not get them to do that, they just, they just wouldn't have done that. And so I just thought that was an amazing change and an amazing way to reach a very large audience that's often overlooked. You can answer the audience's questions. We can live audio stream it on your website, on Facebook Live. You can get people to add their name to petitions. You can get them to commit to call their legislator. You can collect email addresses. There's just so much you can do with it. But the most important thing, just frankly, is it's going to be the largest audience you ever speak to. And if you're working on an issue, if you're, it's really hard to get people in a room for an issue. And this is the way that you can do that. So the good news is our team won the battle before we got to the telephone town hall, but I still wanted to mention it because if we hadn't won so quickly, we would have wound up doing one of these that we had in the works at that point. So, and then last slide is I want to put a picture of us on the line there, and both of us have changed our hair since we've taken these pictures. But I want everyone to have our phone numbers and our email addresses. So we'll take some questions, but I'll leave our contact info up on there for a little while so people know how to get a hold of us. So you ready for some questions, Andy?
I am. And Nicole, I just want to point out, you said
Yeah.
pigs in a blanket, a room at a hotel, and bottled water for $2.25. We're in Joe Biden's America. You could give them tap water in a paper cup for $2.25.
When I said them, I thought, my gosh, the bottled water alone is probably $5 at the Embassy Suites.
Probably.
But the good news, when you get people on their cell phone, you're just grabbing people where they are. And that's what's really making the difference in the impact and the effectiveness of what we're doing these days. So, the pigs in the blanket aside, I like a good hot dog as much as anyone, but what are you going to do? So, okay, so we've got some questions that have been submitted to us. And then also if you've got any additional questions, just put them in the Q&A queue now. And we've got about 15 minutes, so we'll take as many as we can get. First one, Andy, is for those of us in a blue state, and this person's in Maine, what could we be doing to be relevant or prepare for getting back in the game?
I think there's a couple things here. I think one is, this is a place where you can oversell the amount of people that are on your side by generating all of these contacts, whether it's phone calls, in-person meetings, emails. You can have legislators convinced that the majority of people are with you, even if maybe they're not. So I think that's one tool for a blue state. The other thing is you can look at those. There's issues that that don't cut necessarily directly across party lines. So I think that's something else you can do in a blue state is identify those issues that are important to you, where there is some Democrat support to it, where you can get some Democrats there, or maybe win them over with pressure. And that's something you can do to get some legislative wins for your side. And you don't always have to be in the majority to win on policy. I mean, we see examples of that on the left and right, where the other side just does better on the policy front or on the advocacy front, and is able to get policies through that if you poll don't have a majority support in that state, or certainly aren't necessarily supported by the majority party in that state. Right. So I think it's a way to get some wins, a way to get your supporters energized, and a way to make sure that you're not always losing on the issues, even when you don't have a majority in the legislature.
Yeah, couple of things I would add to that is when you don't have a majority in the legislature and you're trying to get a legislative win, sometimes killing one of their bills is easier than getting one of your own passed, and something like that creates some momentum. So I live in Iowa, and Iowa was not always a red state. In 2009, I believe it was, Democrats controlled the House, the Senate, and the governor's office. And they tried to pass one of the biggest tax increases in state history. And we put so much grassroots pressure on the Democrats that were in swing districts that we just got them to, same, very similar situation to what we did this year together in North Carolina. They ended the session without bringing the bill up. And so I would look for wins you can get where you can kill the other side's bill, because in many cases that's a more winnable fight if you're in the minority. That's the first thing. The second thing is I would urge you to take a multi-year approach. You may come this far this year, and you'll come a little further the next year and a little further the next year. When you're running grassroots advocacy campaigns, keep really good track of who's participated with you. Use it at, understand that it's a building exercise. And so making sure that all those people who patch through, all those people who sent that email from the issue impact page, that you're staying in touch with them, that you're cultivating them, that you're finding useful, meaningful opportunities to stay in touch with them, and giving them important things to do that matter. And so you use that to build momentum for your movement over a period of time. It doesn't happen overnight. So those would be the two things I'd add to that.
And one thing I'd add real quick too, talking about the collection of the data side of this with the emails and the people taking action is, if you're also working with candidates, you can then use that to get. And sometimes it's a lot easier to get people to engage on an issue they're passionate about than get them to support somebody for state house or state senate. Get involved there. You can go and push them. You can use that same data to push them to then be active in these races. If there's a candidate that went against them, to get them riled up to support their opponent, and maybe use some of that data to help you flip a district too. So it helps you build an argument against someone, and it can help. I've seen issue advocacy candidates help weaken somebody to the point where they ultimately lose in a general election because they got so beat up over this one issue that has got, and you get a majority of the voters in that district on the opposite side of the issue from that legislator, and then you get a smart candidate to run who uses that as the wedge issue to win in a tough district.
Someone once said to me, and I thought, boy, this is wise words, is you invest in the issue advocacy, but the voter education is free.
Mm-hmm.
So next question, let's see here. How do you think about balancing tools, doors, phones, digital mail, etc.? Do you have data on the value and impact of the various tools? Which have most impact? Do they improve when they're used together?
Yeah, so I think one is I think it definitely good to use them together as much as possible, because you get that whole burgeoning support. People are familiar with the issue when they get that call, so they're going to be more likely to take a patch, so they're going to be more likely to send an email. I think as far as balancing, deciding which tools you use where, I think that's where you lean on good vendors who are going to be honest with you and say if their tool's going to be helpful in that situation. But I also think it's not a cookie cutter percentage, but it's a case by case. It's a case by case what makes the most sense. If the I've seen it be effective. I've seen just patch through calls be effective. I've seen just digital targeted at a legislator's home in their office be effective. I've seen it be more effective together, but you've got to look at what you got to look at what your budget and what your objectives are. And a lot of that times that'll determine what tools to use, because there's on different tools, there's a certain amounts that you have to spend to be able to be effective and and target audiences, that sort of thing. So I think it's a case by case perspective, and having a good team that you trust is going to say, hey, I make the money on digital, but digital doesn't make the most sense for you in the situation. Or, hey, I make the money on direct mail, or I make the money on the phones, but you don't have a big enough budget to be effective there, or go do this, that sort of thing. So relying on those experts to come up with the prescription that fits your individual situation is how I would look for it. Ideal is obviously to use it all together, because it all works better in concert. But I think Nicole and I both realize we don't live in an ideal world. You don't always have the resources to do everything. So you've got to be picky. And sometimes certain things don't fit. You don't fit a certain district. I mean, and sometimes maybe you don't call a certain legislator because it's going to have the opposite effect if you call them. But if you do something else, maybe that's going to work. So it's really looking at it on a case by case basis and not doing the same thing every time everywhere. That's when you get in trouble.
And also and assessing as you go, right? Because I mean, if something like this is playing out over the course of weeks, you should be working, your team should be working with whatever vendor or organizations you're using. You should be looking at the results and the data, and if something is working for you, do more of it. And if something's not working for you, do less of it. So, so you should also be assessing in real time, And so that over time, you're just you're doing what's working for that issue with those lawmakers, what's generating the activity you want to generate.
And you listen to what's happening on the ground, how the legislators are reacting to it. A lot of times they'll tell you, if you've got legislator that says, I'm sick of seeing these ads, guess what? You go run more ads in their district. If you get a legislator who's complaining about the volume of phone calls, guess what? You probably crank up the patch throughs in that district.
Exactly.
So sometimes it's that simple as just, we're listening, and that's where you can rely on your lobbyists too, because they're talking to these legislators. They're on the ground in the state capitol. They know what's making them mad. They know what's working, what's not working. I mean, even in this case, we had one legislator that we would probably like to target that we just didn't target because we know how upset he gets about stuff like this, and he would have made a scene and gone after folks who had gone against him. So we just left him off the target list. We said, we'll target somebody else. So being perceptive to that stuff, and seeing how people are reacting to this stuff, both in data and emotionally, can help you change your plan as you go.
Right, because ultimately, we're talking about influencing a lawmaker and making sure that they hear from their constituents. So the ultimate arbiter of what is effective or not is, does that lawmaker respond to it?
Yeah. And some of them are logical and some of them emotional, and a lot of them are a mix of both. So you gotta kind of figure all that out. And like with campaigns, your plans should not be the same at the end that it was at the beginning. It's got to be adaptive to what's going on, whether that's data, whether that's emotional reactions, but also what's happened in the legislature, what's been reported in the media, all of that. Maybe somebody takes a poll in the middle of it. You got to have that flexibility and be willing to adapt to be successful.
Right. Next question. This one's pretty specific. If a text handled by Campaign HQ and an email both have a similar call to action to call a legislator, how did you attribute it to the text rather than the email? If we were, I guess, if the question is, so if you were directing people to a landing page, we would have a different UTM and the link would be trackable. So we'd be able to tell if they clicked from a digital ad or if they clicked from the text. So that would be the way that you would separate those two out. If you're asking about, we talked a little bit about clicking to call the phone numbers, we would use a different phone number. We would use a phone number that was for the text and a phone number that was for the digital. So that way we would be able to track the two separately.
And I think it's important to track those. I think that's critical. But I think it's also important to realize that all these things work together. So it may have been the text, the email, the phone call, the digital ad that got the ultimate click. But if they hadn't seen other stuff beforehand, they may not have clicked on it. It's the frequency of the touches, the different kind of touches, and that surround sound that Nicole talked about, I think is also important to recognize. So track where the clicks come from, but realize this stuff works in concert too. And it, the more they hear about it in different places, the more likely they're finally going to push the button and take action.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about, actually, I love this one, and we got time probably for one more. So what campaign tactics work well for issue advocacy?
They almost all do. That's the beautiful thing. I mean, there's the digital obviously works well. Your direct mail works well. The right issue, the right budget, TV, radio can work well. It's a lot more. It's not nearly as cost efficient what we talked about today, but all the things on phones, work very well. Your peer-to-peer texts are very effective. Your live calls are very effective. Patch is kind of unique to advocacy, but it's still a version of a live call. It's still that same concept as trying to get somebody to go vote. So it's really a lot of the same tactics as a campaign. I think you really do. I mean, we talked about this today, and it maybe it sounds a little cliche, but you've got to take the campaign approach and apply it to issues. That's what made the difference for us here. If they had just relied on lobbyists from various conservative organizations to get in front of legislators and make noise, it would have passed North Carolina. I have no doubt. It was the uproar of support that got it here, and wasn't like a campaign, and like a campaign, making sure your targets are right. I mean, here we knew that they need to hear from Republican primary voters because that's what they were worried about. If they'd have heard from a bunch of Democrats, they wouldn't have probably not have cared, because they're not the voters they're worried about. If you're in a swing district and you're hearing from hardcore partisans on one side or the other, that's not really going to get you motivated. If you're hearing from swing voters, as voters, you have to win, it matters. If I've talked to plenty of legislators who say they delete message and voicemails and emails without even reading them if it's from outside the district. So they
Right.
realize it's outside the district. So getting that targeting right, just like you got to get that right on campaigns, is critically important. Taking that same kind of laser focused approach that we take with campaigns now is really important. And you're running a political campaign. It's just an issue instead of a candidate. That's really the approach you got to take to it.
Yes, exactly. So we had we worked with one of our clients, did something that was kind of I just loved it because it was, to me, it was one of the I thought it was just a really creative use of campaign tactics to impact a lawmaker. So what they did was we put a pin where the legislator's home was, and we drew a circle, a half mile or a mile or so around. And we took anyone with a landline phone and we sent them an automated call, and anyone with a mobile phone, and we sent them a text message, and we said, state representative so and so is going to vote on this issue. If you see him around the neighborhood, tell him to vote no. And then the next day, they went to his district and door knocked all of those exact same people a mile around the guy's house. He could not go out. He could not go to the grocery store. He could not walk his dog. He could not go to his kid's Little League game. He couldn't go anywhere, but people were asking about it. And once we got his neighborhood with the doors, it was all over. And to me, that was one of the most ingenious uses of a campaign tactic to impact public policy that I'd seen in a
That's
long
brilliant.
time. And Andy, I don't think they knocked more than like 100 doors. They did not knock a lot of doors to do this.
Yeah.
Uh,
And that's one of the cool things here. I mean, if you do this stuff the right way, they perceive that you're doing a lot more than you are. I mean, Nicole and I will tell you, you need to do a lot of it. We're going to tell you that. but yeah, we're jokingly, but honestly, I mean, you can do some of we see huge budgets on this stuff be effective. We see small budgets, if done right on this, be effective.
Right.
Don't let the fact that you're a smaller organization scare you away from doing this kind of stuff, because we can help you come with plans to maximize the resources you've
Yeah.
got and get a lot of mileage out of there. And they don't, again, you don't have most states don't have the spending disclosure laws around this stuff that you have around campaigns. So
Right.
they don't know, your targets don't know how much you're spending, what you're doing, that sort of thing. So you can have that scare them effect with phones, with digital,
Yeah.
and have them thinking that you're spending, 10x of what you're actually spending. And that gets scary to folks. I mean, they worry about that. And we have folks in this campaign scared to death that this same, if they voted the wrong way, that these digital ads and phone calls are going to, instead of being aimed at getting them to vote the right way, they were going to be aimed at telling people not to vote for them in the next election. So
Yeah.
that fear plays into this, and fear's probably the strongest human emotion.
Exactly. So, well, Andy, we are 1 minute over our hour. So,
Ah,
uh, it has been a lot of fun being able to relive this awesome campaign we worked
yes.
on together. So, thank you for being here. Thank you for being our last guest of 2023.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's always good to see you, and I appreciate your friendship, my friend.
Thank you. Look forward to seeing you in person soon, and want to thank everybody for tuning in and listening to us go on and on about this, because it's something Nicole and I could talk about the rest of the night. I know y'all don't
Yeah.
want to listen that long, but appreciate everybody being here, and don't be afraid to reach out to either one of us or both of us if we can help.
Sounds good. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you. Bye.
Thank you.